obsessionist of Grand Canyon, as evidenced by his sporadic but often intensive boating, canyoneering, and climbing within the canyon's depths. His haphazard boating career began in 1997 and continues to this day. He believes the river to be a sanctuary for humor, laughter, discovery, the closest of friendships, and other things too sparse in our fast-paced modern world. For 13 years, he was faculty of adventure education and environmental studies at Prescott College and has intermittently hosted and supported the field-based interdisciplinary program, Grand Canyon Semester. All of this leads him to sometimes ponder, where and who would we be without this magnificent place? He's also been a Grand Canyon youth guide in the past and a friend and mentor to me as well. Matthew Brown.
Thanks, Emma, and welcome everyone. So the story I'm going to tell you has a little bit of a preface first, and that's that I ran into Emma the other night, and she said, I'm so curious what you're going to talk about. And I said, well, I don't exactly know, but the story I'm going to tell, it doesn't really have a plot, and it's kind of nuanced, and you know, in fact, to tell you the truth, Emma, I don't even know if part of it really even has an ending yet. Well, all of that makes me a little anxious. And I said, well, that's okay because it's a story about anxiety. For that. And whenever you meet people who are coming on a trip to Grand Canyon and you're working in a guide capacity or maybe even a friend capacity, the folks show up, but they also show up with everything else that's ever happened in their lives. And on this particular river trip, with the story that I'm going to tell, 6 months before it, I lost like the love of my life. And she decided she didn't want to be in a relationship with me anymore. And heartbreak can be soothed by Grand Canyon. But this one was particularly interesting because this particular individual also happened to work at the river company where I was going to run this trip. So, fast forward a little bit, and you know, because we don't quite know what all is going to happen on a Grand Canyon river trip, and we can't fully anticipate people's motivations when they arrive or show up. And because we want the trip to be good, we do everything we can as guides, as shepherds of Grand Canyon, to let people anticipate the trip as a whole. And we fill them with all of this information because our goal is to try to reduce the anxiety, but build the excitement. And it turns out there's a fine line between anxiety and excitement. And the other interesting thing is that it is Grand Canyon. And, you know, one of the things I share with people who come on a Grand Canyon trip is that the canyon is out to get you, okay? As you enter this place, as many of you know, all right, we have rabid bats. We've got a flesh-eating foot disease. We've got norovirus. We've got flash floods. We've got torrential windstorms. All of that is there and all of that is present. And then we've got the self-sabotage part, right? Like, did you remember everything that you need for the river trip? You know, and what's the crew dynamic going to be like? So we prep people as best as possible for this piece. And I will say the other thing we often remind people is, you know, Grand Canyon, it's no place for a vacation. Be ready. So I go to run this river trip. And I go to the warehouse. It's the day before we rig, and I am not feeling excited about this trip. I'm feeling anxious because I know I'm going to run into this former love of my life there. And so as such, I go in with a strategy of avoidance. And I'm like, all right, well, let's see. So I check in with people, I kind of do my things, and then I like sequester myself to the corner of the warehouse. And I'm like, okay, I'll work on all this toilet stuff. I'll get everything set for the toilets and the groovers and that sort of deal. And as I'm working in the corner, it's also important to note that I haven't run a trip in a while, you know, and so I'm kind of trying to be very, you know, specific and really watch myself and make sure I know I'm bringing everything that I need. And as I'm in this process, you know, I have this thought of like, oh gosh, I haven't done this little task yet. And just as I'm having that thought, this woman who I just absolutely love happens to come up and talk to me. And we hadn't been on, I hadn't been on speaking terms, or she hadn't been on my speaking terms for about 6 months. And it's all professional, and, it feels, of course, in some ways very normal because I was used to seeing her every day. But at the same time, there's a little bit of anxiety with it, right? Like, I think I might throw up on my tennis shoes at one point in time. But she goes away, I continue doing my work. The next day we come to rig, we do our rig, and then of course we have our little, crew meeting where we go through and we make sure we remember everything on the trip. And it looks like we've got it all. We drive away, we head off, and we get to Lee's Ferry. So the trip at the ferry, the folks show up, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty fantastic trip. The weather was forecasted to be terrible, and it's hard to really start building that group sometimes when communication's tricky or when there's other things going on. The weather's fantastic, and we begin to really build that trust and rapport with one another that's so important on a river trip, because when these challenges come in that Grand Canyon throw at us, we all want to make sure that we're at our best to handle them. And Grand Canyon is unique because we really do rely on one another down there. And we rely on one another not just as a crew or not just as a trip, but even bigger than that and in more significant ways. And I think therein lies the magic of a Grand Canyon river trip. So we get to the ferry, we head downstream, and things are looking really good. As a side note, a friend of mine asked me about this trip later on, led to some fun discussions just about all sorts of things that came up. And then I remembered after talking to him, I said, there wasn't one interesting thing about this trip. And he says, well, what's that? And I said, well, what's one of the most essential, but not essential, but, items that you would absolutely always remember, but if you forgot, it'd be a real bummer? And he said, the propane? And I said, well, no, not quite. So back to the trip. It's our second day, done most of the orientations. The group's looking really good. We're thinking about camping at the sand pile down below 22 Mile, and I see this awesome beach on the left, and I spontaneously pull in. We go, we set up camp, and there's this beautiful beach out there. And one of the individuals on this trip who's a newer guide, and I don't think had run a trip yet for that company, fantastic individual, but has a lot of questions, because they're there. And he says, hey, I got another question for you. And then he, very with this high level awareness says, oh, it can wait. And so we get on the boats, we get into our sort of into the boating day session of hanging out. And he remembers the question. He says, oh yeah. He says, since he's running the grouper boat, he says, where's the toilet paper at? And I have this moment, and I think, well, did anyone here happen to pack the toilet paper? And as I'm realizing that was my responsibility, I remembered what I was thinking about in the warehouse at that moment. And I forgot to pack the toilet paper. And the look on the crew's faces, there was disbelief, and then there was panic. And they said, you gotta call the office. And then they realized, ooh, if I call the office, that could be a hard phone call, because I might have to call this former partner. They might be the ones picking up. And I say, nope, that's not the case. I know who the manager on duty is. I go, I make the call, and of course the fantastic people at the warehouse and the office, we all start problem solving. The folks, our crew on the boat, amongst one another, we start problem solving. We're like, okay, how much toilet paper do we have? Let's go through everything. Maybe it did get packed. Maybe it's in there. We come up with 2 rolls. And there it is, day 2, already running out of toilet paper. So then I look up, and then there are all the people on the trip, all the guests. And they happen to all be circled up in like the cutest little way on this beautiful beachfront property that we found. And it's like, well, how to share the news. And part of me finds a lot of hilarity in this situation because it's toilet paper, right? Like, it is a luxury, but for some people it's sort of essential, and it can cause a lot of anxiety And so I see them all there and I say, okay, everyone, remember how I told you there might be some challenges on this trip and we need to really work together as when these things come up. And I said, I forgot something really important on this trip. And they kind of look at each other and, they're scratching their heads. And one of them says, well, did you forget the propane? And I said, no, it's not the propane. And I said, you remember when COVID happened and there was kind of a run on goods in the store and, people were gobbling up everything they might really want. There was one item that was just like you couldn't get your hands on. And then at that moment, then I never thought this joke would come in handy. But I said to him, you ever seen this thing where you wipe with one square of toilet paper, and you fold it in quarters and then you tear this off because you got to save it for later? And I kind of showed him this, and I never thought that joke would become an actual practical skill that you'd have to apply in the canyon. And at that point in time, the curiosity was done. They had figured out that they had no toilet paper. And the looks on their faces, I would have never guessed, because they were about as calm as anything. And they were completely undisturbed. And they just said, hey, we're with you. We can figure this out. And they went then, of course, problem solving in all sorts of funny ways, thinking about bidets and etc. Well, so we didn't really know what our toilet paper situation was going to be. And the next day, we kind of poked our way down canyon, did a lot of interp in the Roaring 20s, and finally got down to South Canyon area. And as we go into South Canyon, we're there for a little while. And then, of course, lo and behold, from the rim, from the office, from the support, come the toilet paper angels, carrying paper with their little toilet paper wings, saving the rest of us, making sure we'll all have clean runs downstream. But what was really going on with all of that was that, those folks on that trip, they really did come together in this amazing way, and they were instantly forgiving. And the amount of trust that people inherently have in the folks that bring them down the river is pretty remarkable. And it's also really remarkable to see people shine in such an incredible way. And I'll tell you, we're never perfect when we go down into the canyon, but a really fabulous and ideal river trip is the one that handles challenge in an incredible way. And that is what really matters, because we really are in it together. And so that was a pretty easy finish to what could have been, a dirty situation. But then there's the relationship part. And, that part really doesn't have a full and clean ending. And I've had to let go of that person. But as I look downstream, I'm feeling a little more excited and a little less anxious. And as we go back to that piece about, how Grand Canyon really makes us who we are, we often think about the rapids we learn to run, or the weather events that we have to learn to endure, or these obviously big challenges that come up that we problem solve. But there's another side to it. And that's this side that it also makes us really vulnerable, and it heightens our sensitivity to these points where when we look up on the cliff and we see light on that wall, or we get the smile from someone on the trip, or we even find an insect in the sand, that it opens our hearts. And it's really that heart opening that brings us together and reminds us that we're all in it together. We're not in it alone.
I'm supposed to reflect back on the story that was just said, and actually had some incredible moments in that story, but all I thought was this visceral reaction that I hat to say, oh God, he's gonna say toilet paper, isn't he? And I'm still thinking about it. I am so pleased to introduce our next speaker, Ma Ray. Ma's a 24-year-old visual artist from Phoenix pursuing a Bachelor of Fine Arts at Arizona State University. His artwork has been showcased in galleries, businesses, festivals, and at the Phoenix Art Museum. Born in Dysphoria to parents who fled ethnic persecution in Burma, Ma came with his family as a refugee to the United States when he was young. While he worked hard to become an American citizen,
Do you like
obviously, Kevin and I was kind of savvy last year. Speak a little bit louder and talk about Ma just a minute more. His art, his greatest inspiration comes from the unforgettable stories, culture, and faces of the Karenni people. His goal is to be of assistance to younger people, particularly those in his Karenni community. Ma is a GCY alum. He has come on 2 GCY expeditions through our Gateway program. And this year, which is really cool, and it's the first time I met Ma, he came as an adult. Into the expedition. So please welcome Ma to the stage and thank him for sharing his story with us.
The Rabasilopoli. Hello everyone in Karenni, my first language. My name is More, and teamwork tonight's theme has been important in my life for as long as I can remember. My experiences with Grand Canyon Youth reinforce the value of working with other people while honoring people for where they're at. GCY gave me the opportunity to see myself more fully while having an amazing experience on the group. First as a participant and later as an adult mentor.
I say you guys need to be off.
Yeah. Sorry, Mom. Go ahead.
It's all good. I know that my GC1 trips will be some of the most important in my life. The slides you're seeing are some of my stories about teamwork from GC1 trips and from other parts of my life. I came to the US when I was 12. Having grown up in a refugee camp in Thailand, my parents, along with thousands of other Karenni people, fled ethnic persecution in Burma. Right away in my American elementary school, I learned about teamwork when I and a few other Karenni kids had to band together to protect ourselves from constant bullying. Of course, along with bullying, there was all other figuring out. Language, clothing, hairstyle, food. If we didn't have each other, it would have been a lot harder. I know other young people my age whose bad choices in life partly come from the hardship and confusion they experienced when they came as a kid to this new culture. When my best friend asked if I wanted to go for 9 days in the Grand Canyon, I was excited, but also scared. I don't know how to swim, but I say yes. My father was the first family member I told. He looked at me and said, "Jamida, why?" I kind of already knew that he wouldn't be excited for me. But with my friend Bo on the trip, I knew that we would be a team. Even though we were the only 2 non-Americans on the trip, and after the second or third day of the trip, all of us were a team. I brought my sketchbook along because I wanted to draw for myself. I didn't know that I would become the trip artist. Didn't know that participants will be asking me to draw their portrait. And that sense of team continued after our trip. when 2 of the participants accepted my invitation to see my artwork displayed at Phoenix Art Museum. Some of the photos that you are seeing are from the refugee camp in Thailand, where I grew up. Being away almost 13 years, I visited the camp earlier this year with my cousin and a friend. A team, we were there to paint, photograph, video, document, and offer support. Yes, it was emotional for me to go back and to see relatives who still live there, friends who were never able to leave. My greatest joys were to interact with people, especially the kids. I made drawings for the 2 little girls. I walked up to them, got them talking, and I coached them to draw something themselves. And whenever I got a kid to come out of their shell, my heart soared. A few months after I came back from the refugee camp, GCY asked me to go on a San Juan River trip. I will photograph, coach art activities, and be an adult mentor. I was the chaperone for 2 young Korean girls from our Phoenix community. Remembering the experiences I had in Thailand, I was trying to help young GCY participants to feel comfortable with each other. The Korean girls, Name and Pome, were especially shy, so I found myself trying to help them mix a little bit more with other kids, reinforcing the youth work that I do with friends in Korean communities across the US. Last summer, GCY made it possible for 8 Korean young people to have the life-changing experience of a Colorado River raft through the Grand Canyon. Like any participants who's been on a GCY trip, there are dozens of memories that I could share, from my several weeks in a refugee camp to where so many moments that touched me. A teenager wanting to know about my life in America, a kid's laugh, seeing an older person in pain with no access to proper medical care, the beauty of the forest, and all the celebrations that tie people together. I had to remind myself that I grew up there. I felt lucky and honored to be part of an organization like GCY that celebrates the individuality of each young person, helps them value their own strengths while recognizing the strengths of others. All of it's happening surrounded by water, wind, sand, sun, and stars. My life is about teamwork, and getting to know about GCY has reinforced that. It's given me the opportunity to grow who I am in ways I could not have imagined, and all of you who support their work make that possible. Thank you for support of Grand Canyon Youth. Thank you for impacting my life.
And I think tonight we are having our own challenges. So thanks for being patient with us as we have humor. Traveling up here and sharing your story. More. And to share not only with the 2 girls he brought on the middle school adventure trip that he did, but also just sharing the impact of Grand Canyon with other folks in his community. I think this year we had 10 youth from his community come on Grand Canyon Youth expeditions. And so it just really shows that power of community and connection. I would like to take a moment, so thank you, Ma. Just let's give him one more. All right. I would like to take a moment to thank our event underwriters, Arizona Raft Adventures, NARBA Institute, and Professional River Outfitters. Pros co-owner Bruce Helene's donation was made in honor of George Wendt for opening the door to many young folks, including Bruce himself, to this amazing world with all its challenges and rewards. So thank you to our underwriters. I think one reason we were able to get to our goal this year was because we had greater business support than we have ever had in our, I think this is my 23rd event. And so really a huge thank you to the businesses and organizations that help sponsor. Would you like to introduce our next speaker, Jean-Philippe?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't want to stand. I don't want to move.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Margarita Cruz. I met her this last year, so if I might introduce her via my paper here. Margarita Cruz is a well-published poet, president of the Northern Arizona Book Festival, contributor for the Arizona Daily Sun, and creative writing teacher at Flagstaff Arts and Leadership Academy and Northern Arizona University. She received her MFA in creative writing from Northern Arizona University. Margarita is a first-generation Chicana and writes to find herself. This was her first year as a trip coordinator for GCY on the Lower San Juan. She was actually on the expedition with Ma, which was incredible. So a nice little tangent there. So please welcome to the stage, Margarita.
Hi, hello, can you all hear me? Cool. So I come from a family of storytellers, but I'm more of a poet and I have the worst memory, so I'm going to be reading it off of my phone. Apologies. Cicadas dance as if their lives depended on it, hold the plant they've landed on between their legs and pinchers. And when I look up from peeing, I don't see the bodies of cicadas, but the ghosts of what used to be. I imagine that the latrine group didn't purposefully do this because of the bouquet of ghosts in front of the groover, but because the view faces a wall of the canyon where, when the sun rises, it will come in at an angle that makes your business feel a little like heaven. I imagine the groover crew walking around the camp just before dark as they were finding a new space for the groover. I imagine two of them who have never spoken before that moment, each grasping a handle on the groover and carefully spacing it between the two of them so as to not touch or bang one another. They're so careful with this poop. Cicadas can mother up to 400 eggs at a time. Those eggs hatch after about 10 weeks. Then the cicada babies, called nymphs, climb up into the trees and plants around them, where they will soon shed their outsides and emerge an adult cicada, ready to fly. They leave their husks, these little yellow, transparent exoskeleton of who they once were as a child, behind on the plant or tree. Not one of them expects to return to their shells, which are only just a memory they will forget in their short lifespan. At camp, as we are all waiting for dinner, I watch a group of students gather around each other to watch one of the girls eat a cicada shell. In one quick bite, the childhood of a cicada disappears. One crunch later, and they're all screaming and laughing. She smiles as if it's a game and tells them about her delicious treat, as if it's hard to swallow fear as a child, to look a wildness in the face as if it's always been something familiar. The students this trip are full of excitement at the idea of it. During the days, the students hop from raft to raft. The water levels are low this week, and many of them are just floating above the floor of the San Juan. They're swimming and chasing each other for a game of tag that lasts for hours. Each raft works together to hide some of them from one another, quickly gathering them into their bottoms, pulling each of them over the sides or directing them to hold on to the sides and move as the one who is it travels around the rafts. There's a silent agreement between everyone that they're working together to hide each other. Sometimes the game of tag is interrupted by the game of water tag. Everyone is pulling buckets of water out, and each guide schemes which sides of the raft would be best to attack from. There's a scramble of bodies and buckets, of rowing and quick commands. Everyone is a flurry of movement and whispering so loud that the raft which we're approaching could probably hear. I imagine this is the same flurry they have when we land and prepare ourselves for hikes. When I was studying to be a teacher back in the day, they taught me that students this young often forget to take care of themselves, but these students prove me wrong. When we land for a quick hike up, I watch as they ready each other with sunscreen and water. Of course, some are too excited and their own peers catch up to them with a hat left behind or a forgotten water bottle. They laugh and joke. During a particularly hard hike, I stay behind with a student who is pushing themselves beyond their normal limits. I give her my hair tie, we take her backpack, and take a couple of breaks. It's the middle of July, it's hot, so she runs out of water before we even hit the top. At every couple of breaks, we sit and listen to our breathing and to the echoes of the cicadas. We ask if she wants to return, but she shakes her head and continues. As we get to the top, we share our water from our bottles so she can keep hydrated. We are applauded as we finally get up to the top with all of the others. They are excited to see us and begin to share snacks and laughter, and most importantly, water. There doesn't seem to be just one student working alone. It feels as if there is a family gathered up on that tall side of the canyon. Just as time is irrelevant to the cicada, it becomes irrelevant to us without access to our phones. The longer the trip becomes, the next few days become a combination of swimming and pulling rafts to avoid catching on rocks and floor. It takes a day or so for them to be comfortable with this new way of living. Even the student who made it to the top last was partaking in more and more. At the last, most notable rapid, we find ourselves there for hours. Here is where I see all of the students stare wildness in the eye and become unafraid. I watch everyone, including the guides, molt from their shells. I watch students who had become quiet become leaders. Because the water is so low, we end up parking on rocks trying to get through the rapid. We watch raft after raft launch itself out to find itself stuck. We toss a rope to each, file into a line around the rope, and pull. We become one larger body working together. There's a scramble of bodies and buckets, of rowing and quick commands. The rafts take turns going forward. As the raft I'm in inevitably finds itself stuck, I hop around the back, scramble back and forth, and feel the water rushing in. I'm worried that I'll slip under. I can feel my legs stick between a water jug and the sides of the raft, and then I see them. I feel the tug of the rope against the raft and catch a glance at them all working in unison, unaware of anything but the need to pull. It takes a couple of hours, but we pull every raft out. We camp nearby and find ourselves lucky enough to experience a storm. Everyone gets tents up in less than 10 minutes. No one stops to take care of themselves. When one tent is up, they move on to the next. The river blesses us with a golden sunset so bright it lights up the whole camp before disappearing into the night. The rest of the trip, I watch each of them as if they are suddenly someone new. I can feel the onset of something new growing inside of themselves, something much larger than cicada shells or poop. I find in them teachers and leaders. I find them trying new foods they were once afraid of. I find them convincing me to be a kid again, to hop in and play tag and run around in the mud. I find them unafraid of a wildness, as if it has always been something that has been there. Humans will live for many different cycles of Arizona cicadas, which typically live for a span of 2 to 4 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. They will hear them come out mostly during the summer, where the heat makes them happy and the sound of their bodies buzzing, warn of incoming summer rain. They will always be born, always bury themselves before crawling up and out to shed their younger selves. I wonder if they will always remember the moment they discovered who they were.
Thank you so much. I'm hearing the stories for the first time tonight as well. So I'm like, oh my gosh, that was beautiful. I almost cried in your, like, there's just tears in every story. So, hello. Thank you. I love thinking of I liked the metaphor of the cicadas. It was very, very apropos, I feel like, to what happens on a river trip when you get to just shed that shell that you have to have. So thank you. I'd never thought of that image before. Okay. I'm going to give a little bit of an update of what's coming next at Grand Canyon Youth, and then we're going to take an intermission. But we are looking downstream. We have already started putting our 2023 expedition calendar. You can believe it. And it's going very well. There is a lot of demand for our expeditions. And so really it's about figuring out how to meet that demand with a lot of the logistical and access bottlenecks that come from high demand. But we are excited and looking forward to 2023. Our individual expeditions are opening soon. So this middle school adventure program that both Margarita and Ma were on is an individual expedition. So any youth can sign up to be part of that. And we are in the middle of our strategic plan where we're really focused on program quality and increasing logistical support. Jean-Philippe, what happened this year in your world that you were so excited about?
GCY evolved to having their own truck and trailer this year, which is
So that was pretty exciting. And then there's a few folks here tonight too. We've been working on an evaluation project where we're trying to understand our impact of Grand Canyon Youth in a different way. I know from listening to those stories that GCY makes a huge impact. And then we want to understand and learn that more. And so we've been working with some folks at the NARBA Institute and NAU. All of them pretty much are alumni, so have been around for a long time. Jean-Philippe, alumni. But it isn't just alumni. There are so many other folks that make GCY what it is, including all of you. Would you like to tell us what's happening next?
Yeah, so here's what we need you guys to do. In the next 15 minutes, we'll be fixing some sound stuff. What we would love from you is take a potty break, go get some more food, go get some more libations, but not too many, right? And then we have a tech desk. If you need help looking at auction items, feel free to flip through your phone, flip through some of our auction items that we have. Talk amongst yourself, embrace our community, and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes. Sound good?
Thank you. So, don't talk.
One, two, three, testing. Hello.
Can you guys hear me? Cool. I can also talk extremely loud. Well, as we're filing back in, finding our seats, we have a couple of announcements. First and foremost, we are above our 35,000 threshold. Thank you, thank you, thank you, from the small donors to the large donors. And thank you for everybody tuning in online too. This feels weird. I'm talking to a camera. We have folks joining in from Phoenix, from Seattle, from Ohio, from Pennsylvania, from even across the street with a sick child. I know the story. I do have a 20-month-old baby, and so it's probably past my bedtime now. It's officially past my bedtime. That's called vamping before we wait for everybody to get in. I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. I'm going to pass it over to Emma. As you can see, we've fixed our microphone issue. I'm on a single microphone, and we're just going to play past the microphone. So our speakers, if you didn't catch that memo, that's kind of what we're going to do. We'll put it in here and pass it off to the next person. So Emma, let's hear from you and our sponsors.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hopefully you had a good intermission. I certainly did. It was wonderful to hear everyone and see everyone. There are some seats. If you are standing in the back and you want to come and sit down, we would love to welcome you to get comfortable. I'm going to spread out because I think spread some time so folks can come in. I want to give a shout out to our $1,000 sponsors tonight: Rocky Ridge Realty, R&A Import Auto, Fratelli Pizza, and Mountain Sports Flagstaff. Thank you so very much. Whoop, whoop. I have had the incredible pleasure of being on the river with our next storyteller, Bennett Wakayuta. And we do a trip every year with Northland Preparatory Academy and Mark Lancaster's English trip. And they read Encounters with an Archdruid. If there's any river nerds out there like me, it's a really cool book. But you're exploring the theory of voice. And so on each of those trips, they bring a historian, a cultural representative, and a scientist, because each of those perspectives are really important on the river. And then the student chooses a topic. So the trip I went on, a student chose the topic of uranium mining and then explored that topic from a cultural perspective, a scientific perspective, and a historical perspective. And so it's an incredible, incredible expedition. And I think we've been running it almost for 10 years. Yeah. And so I met Bennett on that expedition. I want to make sure that I say all the things about Bennett because he's great. Bennett can engage a group, and he is very generous in sharing his culture with others. He is Wallapai and Hopi and lives in Peach Springs, Arizona. Bennett's work in cultural resources include archaeology, field trip monitoring, and surveys on the Wallapai Nation and ancestral homelands. Bennett also works closely with Wallapai youth teaching cultural arts and language, where he shares the knowledge of ethnobotany and plant usage, including traditional agave roasting and how he was shown to make traditional tools and wares. This passing of traditional knowledge requires working closely with the elders of the Wallapai tribe and and neighboring First Nations people. He says that inspiration for his work comes from necessity, the necessity to keep these traditions alive. Bennett joined an all-Indigenous youth trip that was a collaboration between Grand Canyon Youth, Grand Canyon Trust, Arizona Raft Adventures, and Grand Canyon Expeditions as a knowledge holder this year. After the trip, youth participants described how connected and supported they felt through his presence and teachings. Even in the short span of one trip, Bennett helped build a team, a community, and you can tell from his story that his gift is connection and being in relation. Bennett was not able to join us tonight, but he shared his story via video, and so we'll watch that now.
My name is Bennett Wakayuta, Wallapai and Hopi. My family comes from Mohawk Canyon, and that's my connection with the river. I didn't know a lot of this until I started living in Peach Springs, Arizona. But I was raised on the Mormon Youth Program since I was 8 years old till I was about roughly 21. And so I went back and forth from Encinitas, California to Flagstaff, Arizona. And then a lot of times from Flagstaff, either in the summers, my aunts on my Hopi side would come get me, or my aunts on my Wallapai side would come and get me. So I did a lot of upraising in 4 places, which made it kind of incredible, but it gave me a sense of not having a full connection to any place. Either way, you know, I spent a lot more time in Moenkopi in Lower Village than I did in Peach Springs, and I was more ethnocentric to the Hopi side. When I moved to Peach Springs, I didn't move to live. I went there for like revenge reasons. My little brother Joe was a river runner, and he was his body was found down there at Diamond Creek Rapid. And I at that time I was pretty wild. I was going out there to look for revenge, and instead I found a wife, started a family. I did a lot of hell raising at that time, and I started doing a lot of jail time. I started doing a lot of rehab time, and one of those one of my last times in rehab was when I got a year sobriety. I just had got out, and my wife was the secretary at the health department at the time. She had gotten a call from the cultural department that said, "Hey, can you find like 8 people that could get on a river in 30 minutes and for 14 days?" So she called me and she said, "Bennett, get a couple pairs of shorts. You're going on the river." I said, "All right." And that was a life-changing thing. I didn't know anything about Wallapai. I didn't know the spiritual connection with the canyon, the rocks, the land, the way I do now. And all I did know was like Hopi things. But now I feel like I'm more ethnocentric to the Wallapai side. Either way, I think it was more of the connection with my family connection, only because before my mom had passed on, she had given me instructions to traditionally cremate her and then have her ashes spread, half of her near my little brother Joe in Peach Springs, and then the other half at the little house in Mohawk Canyon. And I had no idea what she meant by the little house. All I knew was that really I just thought that we all lived in like the HUD housing in the Peach Springs area, and I was totally wrong on that. I didn't realize that we had lived, still kind of like in bands, like in Fraser Wells area, Mohawk Canyon area, out by Grand Canyon West area, Peach Springs area, Big Sandy area. These places were all spread apart. It was only till recent that we all started living all together as one in Peach Springs. But either way, I went down. My brother Gary, he was the one that showed me where the little house was, and it was a shack. It was there was a corral. There was a small home. And there was 12 people that lived there. Most of them were girls, all my aunts, my mom, and then one boy, my Uncle Paul Hunga. And, it took them 15 days by wagon to go from the little house up to the school where they had to go to school at Fraser Wells. But, they talked about how when the river was low, that's where they would cross, at the mouth of Mohawk Canyon. And that crossing was there before the dam, and we have stories on that one about how one of our uncles or grandfathers went and kind of fell in love with a Paiute royalty woman, and it was a shunned wedding because they felt like she was stolen and that he wasn't worthy. But that's where we come from. Well, from a rowdy cowboy type uncle and our grandfather, and Paiute royalty. And I think about that crossing. I think about that was our summer home, and we followed the deer. Summertime would be down there by the river where the deer would be. Wintertime we would go up to the little house, and this was my mom's generation, and that's how long ago, which wasn't a long time, that we lived going up and down nomadically in the canyon. And so learning all this family history, learning all the songs, learning our initiations into manhood ways down through the canyon, that created like a spirit in me. And that first river trip in 2010 was the most eye-opening experience. That's where Wallapai spirit, entered into my soul. And I went full forward with everything that happened. I maintained a sober lifestyle, and I do what I can to help our youth, mainly our boys, to become the men that they need to be. And I have so much more stories to tell. Every river trip since then has been a miraculous, eye-opening experience. And I do my best to be an advocate for everything that the river stands for. I really hope to meet a lot of you, and I'm working on that. So I want to thank you for your time, and you guys have a good night. And has been, a miraculous, eye-opening experience. And I do my best to be an advocate for everything that the river stands for. I really hope to meet a lot of you, and I'm working on that. So I want to thank you for your time, and you guys have a good night.
While Jean-Philippe is fixing the mic stand, I wanted to highlight our All Indigenous Youth programs. This year, we actually were able to run 2 All Indigenous Youth programs. And what I can tell you is that there are 11 tribes that consider Grand Canyon sacred, and there's not a lot of access along the river. And so these are the first trips that we have been able to find of their kind. And the stories and the impact from the trips are different than I expected, and so powerful. And so we are very grateful to be able to be doing 2 expeditions in 2023 for All Indigenous Youth. So kind of just another story of what we're doing.
It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Matt Kaplinski. Matt is a river guide and a geology nerd. He has a BS in geophysics from Western Michigan University and an MS in geology from Northern Arizona University. While working towards his MS at NAU, he was invited on a private river trip in Grand Canyon, and his fate was sealed. Since that first trip, he's been lucky enough to work for over 30 years as a research scientist studying the effects of Glen Canyon Dam on the sandbars of the Colorado River, and as a commercial boatman for a number of outfits, including GCY. And on a personal note, my first ever trip with GCY as a youth, 2007, I had no idea what I was doing. I had done boating, but didn't know what I was doing. Matt was the TL on that trip. And all I remember a lot of good things from that trip, but really what I remember is really asking Matt to run us through the Dome of Safety. To this day, I don't think I've ever done it. We can tell you about Dome of Safety later. But anyways, here's Matt Kaplinski, everybody. We can adjust it if needed.
The Dome of Safety. That's at Quaggant Rapid, in case you're wondering. I want to tell you a story today about, it has nothing to do with teamwork. Maybe it has something to do with what happens when you abandon your teamwork, or that sometimes you have to rely on your own self rather than the team. This story it's a cautionary tale of what happens when you walk out of a perfectly good river trip. This is the story of the worst hike of my life. This hike happened on an amazing trip in 1989. This was my first motor trip, my first science trip. I did my first baggage trip with Expeditions later this summer. This is when I first started down there. I got invited on Stan Buse Grand Canyon teachers trip, not GCY, GCT. These trips were run throughout the 80s. They brought high school teachers on these trips, and all the high school teachers had teams, and they did little science projects on them that were directed by Stan Buse, and a bunch of other scientists came up with these projects. My advisor at the time, Paul Morgan, got invited to go on the trip and come up with a project for the teachers. Paul is a heat flow guy. He only knew one equation, and that was the heat diffusion equation, which is very important. It's how heat is transferred up. This has nothing to do with the hike. Sorry. I'm going to go way over time. Anyway, so Paul, because he's a heat flow guy, the way the crust of the earth generates heat and it's diffused is by the radioactive decay of different rock types. So Paul had this contraption that was about twice the size of this thing in his lab, that you put a rock in there and you waited for a couple of weeks and it detected how much radiation was coming off of it. Any type of rock. So this was the project that we were going to do, he was going to do on the river trip, was to collect a bunch of mud samples along the river from the tributaries and try to detect the background radiation that's coming off of the sediment that's being shed off of the Colorado Plateau that has naturally occurring uranium deposits in it. So how do you know if there's a uranium spill? You have to subtract how much natural radiation is in there to know. Anyway, nothing to do with the story again. Damn it. Paul couldn't go, so he said, Matt, he's a British guy, why don't you go on this trip and collect the mud for me? Yes, Paul, I will. I was sick of school by that time, and I had done a private trip. My fate was sealed. So I went on this trip, and it was amazing. This was Stan Buse is on the trip. Larry Stevens. These names you should all know. Steve Carruthers, Brian Durker. These people that, for me, were mentors. They're friends. Frenters? These Frenters. These people that are hugely influential on me. This trip, I remember Ted Mallis was on the trip, Teo, reading at Grapevine Beach, reading the letter from Manuel Lujan, Secretary of Interior Lujan, that ordered the environmental impact statement on the Glen Canyon Dam, the environmental impacts of the dam on the downstream environment, 1989. And I remember Ted saying, boy, this might have some pretty big implications for a few people on this trip. And he couldn't be more accurate on that. That sort of defined my career. Again, that has nothing to do with the story. So anyways, we went on this trip, amazing trip, and I went nuts. I was super excited. I was like 26 years old, and I was going to get the best dam sediment samples in the world, and a bunch of them, and I did. And then I left the trip at Hermit. And I packed up all the stuff, and I had probably a 90-pound pack right in there. It was probably 90 pounds. An old external frame JanSport pack. And we got dropped off probably about noon, or I did. It was me. In my multiple personalities. We all hiked out together. And if you've been down Hermit, there's some nice springs down there. I spent some time in the springs. I probably napped. It was great. It was awesome. And then I was like, oh my God, my ride's meeting me at 4. I better get the hell out of here. And it's like 2 o'clock. So up the trail I go. I think it's like 9 miles, Hermit Trail. It was a long 9 miles. And I crashed. Super bonk. Up in the Coconino, I'm going switchback to switchback with this 90-pound pack. And at one point, I threw this thing down and I dug in there, and the only food I had was a can of tuna in oil. I didn't know how to open it. And I just smashed at it with a knife and pried this thing open and was like shaking and like... It was the best tuna I've ever had in my life. It saved my life. I got up to the top, and my ride had left. So there I am at Hermit's Rest. And I didn't know what to do other than to keep walking. So I did. And I walked into the South Canyon Village, which is 7 miles. So I get into the South Village at like midnight. And I didn't know what to do. Pre-cell phone, there's no cell phones. There's pay phones, but you had to have, remember the cards? You had the prepaid cards and you had to punch your number in. I didn't have one of those. So I decided I'm going to hitchhike home. And I found a piece of cardboard in one of the dumpsters at the Bright Angel Lodge. And I dug in, I had Sharpies. So I wrote Flagstaff on the back of this piece of cardboard. And I taped it to the back of my 90-pound pack. And I'm like, all right. I had nothing. I didn't have a sleeping bag. I was going to get picked up and go. But I did have a bunch of mud. And of course, I was raw to the canyon. So I had everybody's a photographer back then. You had a Nicormat camera with 3 lenses and a big heavy tripod. And so I hitched the pack up and I was like, okay, I'm going to walk to Tucson and hitchhike in the morning. So I did. So I hiked to Tucson, which is, 5 miles or so. No, it's not 20. Felt like it. So I get within sight of the South Canyon entrance. I'm like a half a kilometer from the entrance, and the lights go on. And a Park Service cruiser puts his siren on, puts the lights on, and pulls up in front of me. And this guy gets out, and he's pissed. This ranger is upset that I am hitchhiking in a national park. And it's 2 a.m, and I'm like, dude. But we didn't say dude back then. But I was like, man, I just hiked out of a trip and I still smell like tuna fish. And I'm just trying to get to Tucson so I can hitchhike and get home. And this guy, in 1989, there weren't a lot of rangers, law enforcement rangers that were like this, but he was fully kitted out, flak jacket, guns, tasers, like that was uncommon at that time. And he was also like 5 feet tall and pissed. And he's like, you're hitchhiking, I could arrest you. And I'm like, I don't want to go home. And he's like, you're going back to the Mather campground. Put your pack in my cruiser. And so I throw the pack in the cruiser's trunk, and he drives me back to the Mather campground, and he drops me off there and says, you get up in the morning and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whatever, dude. And then I'm sitting there, and I realize I don't have a tent, I don't have a bag, I don't have anything. And then I get mad, and then I'm like, I'm hiking out. So it's 3 a.m, and I hitch up again, and I fucking walk out of the park. Cautiously. So that this guy doesn't find me again. Because I know he's looking. And I get to the other side of Tucson about 4 a.m, and I drop the pack, and I set my tripod up, and I put my Flagstaff sign in the tripod, and I go into the ditch and curl up like a centipede and just like, and take a nap for maybe an hour, and then I hear these tires, yeah, Flagstaff, woo! And I get up, and there's a Volkswagen Cabriolet. It had the bar over the top, and I break down the tripod, and I get the pack, and I walk over to this thing, and I get about 10 feet from it, and these guys go, ha ha, and take off. It's just ridiculous. The whole thing gets just silly, and by then I'm just like, of course they laugh. Of course. How's my time? Okay, so anyways, I put the pack down and put the thing up again, and I wait. In the morning at Grand Canyon, everybody's coming to Grand Canyon. Nobody's leaving. So there's not a lot of hitchhiking opportunities. After a couple hours, truck pulls up, a big rig, 18-wheeler without a trailer. And he's like, hey, you going to Flagstaff? I'm like, yes, please. He's like, I'll take you as far as I can go. I'm like, awesome. Load up. We drive south. And I'm just about to fall asleep in the cab of his truck, and he stops and he turns left just south of Red Mountain. And he's like, I'm like, what's going on, man? And he's like, oh, I live down here. This is as far as I'm going. 4 miles from Valley. And it's like noon. So I hitch up and walk into Valley. I think it's Grand Canyon Junction now. Yeah, Grand Canyon Junction. So, and then I set up at the corner there and wait for probably 4 hours. And I finally, someone stops, wonderful, nice lady that I hate. And she's going to take me to Flagstaff. She's wonderful because she picked me up. I hate her because she was from New Jersey. And she had just divorced her husband and drove out west. And she hadn't talked to anybody in like 3 weeks. And I load up in there, and all I want to do is go home. And she's like, oh my God, this is so beautiful out here. This is amazing. You would not believe it. Oh my God, have you hiked the Grand Canyon for 80 miles back to Flagstaff? And all I want to do is go to sleep and get home. And then we get into town, and I lived at the time up on North Beaver, past the hospital, and you're gonna start telling me to wrap it up, aren't you? Anyways, she's like, maybe we could go back to my hotel room and have a cocktail. Like, please, right here. I live right here. Drop me here. So she dropped me off at the gas station at the bottom of Forest. So the last half mile, I hate that street. I had to go up that hill. And I finally got home. It's like 32 miles in 32 hours. Mile an hour is pretty lame pace. But anyways, that's the story of the worst hike in my life.
Thank you. That was very fun. Thanks, Matt. I think I actually heard that story on a boat hanging out with you. I'm fairly certain. Totally. We are coming up to our last story of the night. Boo. The stories have made me laugh, brought tears to my eyes. And before we get there, to our last story, we have a few things to bring up. We have some event underwriters. I was going to quiz Jean-Philippe to say the event underwriters in alphabetical order. Can you do it?
Azra Narba Pro.
Nice. Good job. We've heard so many stories inspired by teamwork or not tonight. Jean-Philippe, what is one thing that makes you think about with teamwork?
This event.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree. Thank you all for coming. There are so many people that we want to thank before we get into our last speaker. We want to give a shout out to all the people who tuned in tonight. Shout out to everyone who has come here. To the storytellers, we're going to thank them again at the end. I want to give a huge shout out to our staff team. Claire Magnuson, this event would not have happened without you. Please give a big wave at the top. Woot, woot. Chantal Mossman over here. And then a lot of other staff that are cleaning up and working remotely as well. So thanks to Omar, our field staff manager, Alex, our design manager, Mario, our wellness manager, Cassandra, our expedition director, Mary Ellen Arndorfer, our finance director, Haley Nelson, our intern, who am I forgetting? Kelly, our bookkeeper, who is doing some great things in the back room. Also really want to give a huge shout out to Zach Fountain for all of his patience and hard work leading up to this event. He's one of our board members. Thank you. Could not have done this event without him. And John Propster back on the filming. So thank you all. So yes, we also love to do a quick visual poll. If you are an alumni, raise your hand. Excellent. If you are a field staff, raise your hand. Yes. If you have been on a GCY expedition, raise your hand. Oh, wow. Look at that. Board members. Got some great board member representation here tonight. Thank you so much, board members. Yay. So definitely a team that makes this all happen this evening. Okay, last I checked, we have raised over $35,000. So not only did we meet our goal, we met our stretch goal. That has never happened. So I am so proud and so pleased. So thank you all so very, very much. And all of the donations go towards making river expeditions affordable. So thank you all so very much. Now I would like to welcome to the stage Wayne Ranney. He is not speaking this evening. He has told a story at a previous event, but he is going to introduce our last storyteller for the evening. And if you don't know Wayne, he is also a geologist, author, and friend.
Well, what a pleasure to introduce our last speaker tonight. And for those of you that are non-River Grand Canyon aficionados, you might not know the name Mike Buchheit, but Mike is a native of Iowa and made his way to Phoenix, Arizona, where he became an insurance adjuster. And if you ever want to have a backdoor view of what it's like to be an insurance adjuster, Mike Buchheit can tell you the story of what it's like and crazy people and what they do. Like most Arizonans, he made his way to the Grand Canyon, hiked in the Grand Canyon, and then his wife, Kim, got a job at the South Rim Village. Mike then became the director of the Grand Canyon Field Institute, which is a program of the Grand Canyon Conservancy. And it was my great pleasure in 1999 to be invited by Mike to be one of the guides for the Grand Canyon Field Institute. And it's a great pleasure and a distinct honor to introduce to you Mike Buchheit.
Thank you, Wayne. Wow. It's good to see people's faces again, unmasked. Thank you for that introduction. It's an honor to be here. I can't tell you, I just am a huge fan of Grand Canyon Youth. I'm going to share a few slides. Chantel, the clicker extraordinaire, is going to advance some slides I took of a 2011 Grand Canyon Youth trip, my one and only trip. And yeah, there's me working the temples on the way to Plateau Point. Food time. Anyway, let's see. My relationship or association with the Grand Canyon Youth goes back quite a ways. I began my tenure at Grand Canyon in 1994, and in 2003 I joined the board of Grand Canyon Youth, and it was about 4 blocks that away at a board meeting, and Patrick Conley, is Patrick here tonight? Patrick Conley, in his living room, where we had a unanimous vote to hire our first executive director, who sits before me right now. We were kids. Emma Wharton accepted the position. And the smiles and applause and hugs here tonight and the exponential growth of the program, the huge impact on the youth that have cycled through, the protection of the resources, the places where we play, the furthering of the understanding. It's just, I've got goosebumps, and it's not just because I live in Phoenix and I'm up here now. So thank you, Emma, for everything that you've done for the community and the universe. Okay. Wahoo. Okay, so just a little more context about my situation. So they say to really master something, you have to spend about 10,000 hours doing it. So I was closing in on 10,000 hours as a backpacker and day hiker and photographer, and had never been on a river trip. And the Field Institute, we started to do some river trips, and I got a few trips under my belt. I think I topped out at about 12 or 13, which is nothing in this crowd. I think there's got to be some 200 trip veterans. But I realized what all the fuss was about. Oh, this is pretty cool. 3 squares and all your toys and lots of places to stay cool. So I took to it like a backpacker to water and enjoyed every minute of it. And the river trip, the canyon experience in general and the river trips in particular left an indelible mark on my soul and psyche as a outdoor educator, as a champion of public lands as a human being. It's just, it's in my marrow now. I've had a lot of upheaval in my last 3 years on a personal note. I live in Phoenix now, as I mentioned. But the resilience and the determination that I cultivated playing and working in a land where with razor thin margins of error have really helped me push through some very difficult times in my life. And not a few people in this room supporting me and praying for me and helping out in 100 different ways. So I have you all to thank. But I want to thank the River community for taking a shaggy ex-claims adjuster and a backpacking snob and being patient with me and showing me the whole world down there. And what can I say? So today, like I said, I'm in Phoenix. I'm actually, I have Grand Canyon Youth to thank for this. I'm working with a nonprofit down there called Kids in Focus. So they take underserved kids out into urban landscapes and city parks and teaches them some basics of photography, and it's just amazing. So the ripple effect, it goes on and on and on. The trip in question, oh, how much fun. So 2011, this trip was called Grand Inspiration. So it was an art-based trip. So I was along allegedly to teach kids photography. We had a Park Service woman teaching journaling. We had a mixed media artist. I'm blanking on some of the names, but great fun. About 16 kids. A lot of them knew each other already, so they were pre-bonded. And John Napier. And I got two of my nephews applied and got on the trip, neither one of which saw themselves as an artist then, but they do now. So I can't tell you how much fun that was down there. Some of my highlights, running lava at 24,000 on the 4th of July in 2011. That was a big ride. We were in Park Service motor rigs with Park Service motor pilots, Al and Ariel. And the engine died in the V-Wave on the big boat. But they cartwheeled through it and had the ride of their lives. And they were all in costume. So I was always the wet blanket at the board meetings, risk management, wah, 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 wah. But I was thinking as I was taking their picture, oh, there they are. Cricket. And so I remember thinking as they were going through, I'm thinking, how do I explain if someone gets a boa caught in the prop? And, but anyway, I just had a good time with it. So that, I think, here's some teamwork. They dropped the river level, so we woke up with the big boat on the beach. And it's like, well, kids, we got some bad news and some worse news. No breakfast today, and we got to push this boat back into the water. So that took some time, and everybody was real cool about it. And I got some good pictures of it. I don't know if I put one in the slide deck or not. Anyway, great group of kids. And then the art exhibit. So when we finished the trip, rather than just go home and shower and get back to life, we went to the Grand Canyon Village with the intent to create a piece of art from each of the to document it, and do two things. One, elbow out the ranger at the McKee Amphitheater for the evening program on short notice, to have all these kids get up in front of 100 bewildered Western European tourists who were there to hear a ranger talk about bobcats and show their slides and get up there and say, I'm an so-and-so, and I'm an artist, and I'm here to show you my work, and explain their shot and what inspired them and what they were trying to convey. And it was just golden. And then all those pieces of artwork went into, there we are, Scouting Lava. All those pieces of artwork went into the old headquarters lobby in a hastily prepared but a fantastic art exhibit, which you still have in storage, right? So, so that was very special for me. I can tell you my two nephews that were on the trip. I think they're in there somewhere. It's the first thing they say every time I see them, and I don't see them often, is how that changed their lives. So, woohoo, that's just before the motor died. Poor John. So anyway, and then another nephew, he picked up a guitar on that trip and he plays to this day, and he's quite accomplished. That was the first time he ever played an acoustic guitar, Alex Meyer. And we just had one heck of a time. And me personally, I don't have children. And this trip and my connection with Grand Canyon Youth and all the kids that I've worked with ever since give me hope for the future and inspire me. And I realize they got it. You know, they're just kind of waiting for us to step aside. Not yet, but so, you know, the day will come. So there's our last shot on the river, lots of smiles. Sarah Hooker was kind of our TL down there. It's me behind her. A lot of familiar faces. Can't see Ariel's boot cast, but that was a thing. But she didn't miss a beat. So what fun was that? And I think I have one more. So here's one of the shots from one of the kids. Cricket took this shot. What's Cricket's real name? Amy? Cricket. So Cricket took this shot of one of her female fellow passengers at the LCR with this beautiful sarong. And this was, I think, my favorite piece in the whole exhibit. In fact, when we were setting it up, the exhibit up, Chief of Interpretation Judy Helmick-Bryan was just walking through on her way to lunch, and this photograph stopped her in her tracks. And she said, "Who took this picture?" And we introduced Cricket, and she said, "Is that for sale?" And she made a sale. So when the exhibit came down, I think we might have made a new copy for her. Yeah. So that's still in your permanent collection. But she was officially a professional artist. If you sell a piece, you're an artist, okay? So again, the ripple effect. So thank you for this opportunity. Year-end giving, you know, we blew by the goal tonight. That's fantastic. Keep GCY in your hearts and souls and as part of your giving strategy. And thank you. I'll just thank you as a big fan, a former board member, and somebody who just loves this program. Thank you, staff, Zach, John, great job up there. Underwriters, donors, big and little, past board members, current board members, future board members, all the youth that have taken advantage of this program and spread the word. So and Mike Buchheit. Okay, yeah. Well, thank you very much and have a great evening.
One more time for Mike.
Thank you, Mike, so much for coming and sharing your story this evening. Well, those are some great stories tonight. If you are interested in sharing a story at a future River Tales, we would love for you to come and share a story. If you are interested, you can email me, Emma, EMMA, @gcyouth.org, and we'll get you on the list. We're not sure what the theme will be, but as you've heard tonight, sometimes the theme is relevant and sometimes it's not. It's really about sharing a great story. Jean-Philippe, do you want to give a final shout out?
Yeah, let's do one more shout out for the sponsors. Do we have another slide so we can all read? One more time, give it up for the sponsors. Warner's, Narba, Azura Pro, RNA, Rocky Ridge Mountain Sports, Knackert, Fratelli's, Wildland Trekking, National Bank, Flagstaff Emergency Physicians, Benefit and Financial, and Mountain View Pediatrics. We haven't given too many shout outs to our sponsors that were tuning in online and donating, but one donor kept showing up on Emma and I's text thread that we wanted to shout out, Lisa Kearsley, who kept giving different donations throughout the course of the night, up to $400. So that was super cool. So thank you everyone for being here and donating.
Excellent. We want to give you a couple housekeeping things that I forgot to mention. Wayne has a tour in the auction. If you want to learn geology at Grand Canyon, bid on his incredible tour. And then Mike Buchheit has he's been generous to this event for years, several photographs also in the event, in the auction. So if you go and bid on the auction items, again, it's open tomorrow until noon. And then if you are a winner, you will get a text message. So fancy, so different from the nights of like grabbing the bid sheets and running away. So you have some time. And if you saw the item that you were really excited about disappear from the auction, we wanted to clarify what that meant. That meant that the auction item went for 130% of value. And so they bought it outright. And so that's where those went. And so we are going to look at ways of continuing bidding potentially in future years. I would love to call all of our storytellers who are here tonight up on stage so we can give them a final thank you. And then we have a gift for them as well. Woo!
Thank you to Ma. Thank you to Margarita. Thank you to Matthew Brown. Thank you to Mike Buchheit and Matt Kaplensky. And of course to Bennett, who was not able to be here. We love you all.
We also have gifts for John and Zach and then Brent from Fratelli's. Thank you so much. And these are all photographs of Mike's, but we're not going to give him a photograph of his own, so we got him something else. Thank you all so very much. Make some great stories this year, everybody. Thank you so much. Be safe leaving. We have to be out of the building by 9. And so talk to your friends, but do it while you're helping clean up around your seat. And thank you so very much for coming, and we will see you next year.
Thank you.